Welcome to this video on radians. In this video we're looking at what a radian actually is. It's a bit of background because you're going to be using radians a lot in this external assessment. We know that in a circle we have 360 degrees. The circle is made up of lots of these tiny little angles in here, all of which are 1 degree. So for example we might have this angle here which we could say is 57 degrees. A radian is a different way to measure that same angle. Now this is analogous to if you look at something like height. You could say that this girl here is 152 centimeters high, but you could also use a different unit of measurement. You could also say that she's 5 feet tall. Now both are correct. They're just a different way to use a different unit for the same measurement, the same height. So in the same way, this 57 degrees or just over, we call 1 radian. They're two different ways to measure the same angle. And if you're curious about where the idea of a radian came from, it came from the idea of the radius of the circle from some kind of angle. You've got these two lengths from the center right to the outside, which are the radius. Now when this outside arc length equals exactly the same length as both of these lengths here, the radius, all three lengths are identical. And that is when we say we have 1 radian. So that's where the idea of 1 radian came from. And while we learned before that there are 360 degrees in a whole circle, there are 2 pi radians or 6.28 radians in a whole circle. So we could draw all those things out. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this little bit in here is 0.28 radians in there. So that gives you an idea of how big 1 radian is. And you might need to remember that there are 2 pi radians, which is the same as saying 6.28 radians in a circle. So we know that it's about 57 degrees, but to get a little bit more accurate, 1 radian equals 57.3 degrees. This is how big 1 radian is. And you might want to change between radians and degrees. So if you want to change from degrees, say you have 57 degrees, to go into radians, you multiply by pi and then divide by 180. Or if you want to go the other way, so say you have radians and you want to know how big is that in degrees, you would do the opposite, which is multiply by 180, then divide by pi. So for example, you might get asked to change 2.5 radians into degrees. Now that is going from radians to degrees, so what we do is we write out our 2.5, then we do this equation, so we multiply by 180 and divide by pi. You put that in your calculator and you'll find that that equals 143.2 degrees. So that's how you change from radians to degrees. Or if you got asked to do the opposite, so you had 155 degrees and you need to change it to radians, you'd use this top formula because you're going from degrees to radians. So you'd get 155, your degrees, and then you'd multiply it by pi and divide by 180. You put that in your calculator, you'll get 2.7 radians. So this is everything you need to know from this video. You need to know that 1 radian equals 57.3 degrees, and that a radian is just a different way to measure the same thing, to measure angle. Now in a whole circle, you'll have 2 pi radians, which is the same as saying 6.28 radians. 1 radian means that this arc length around the outside is the same length as the radius of the circle. And if you want to change between degrees and radians, you have to go multiplied by pi divided by 180 if you start with degrees and want to turn into radians. Or if you want to do the opposite direction, you start with radians, you want to go to degrees, you have to multiply by 180 and divide by pi. And this is everything you need to know about radians.